I came along at the right time. It was not usual that you would meet black women composers, but it was not unheard of. And I really didn't care whether there'd never been one or not. I mean, that's how much I believed that this is what I was supposed to do.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. Have you ever heard a song played on the radio or television and it stopped you in your tracks? It was so simply sublime that you had to linger for a moment. That's what happened to me a few years ago when I heard Mary Watkins perform her arrangement of We Shall Overcome. Melanie, DeMore was singing vocals, and they were performing at the Sister Comrade event in Oakland several years ago. Sublime. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you to watch a video of the performance. So you can imagine my excitement when I had the opportunity to sit down with Mary Watkins to interview her for the Zami Nobla podcast. She was warm and generous in her storytelling of her 8 decades of creativity.
My name is Mary D. Watkins, and I am a musician. I'm a composer. I'm a pianist, a songwriter, an arranger. Music is my life. I think probably my first professional work, my first professional work was playing at a church, when I was a kid. It was professional in that I was expected to perform as a professional, in order to carry myself as a musician, to be familiar with the service and at what point we do what is done when we sing whatever we're singing. And I was only 8 years old, but I think when I was somewhere around 12, I used to get a little stipend. I'd get $2.50. And, that can tell you that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. What church were you part of?
I grew up in the AME church. And as a matter of fact, when I was 9 years old, mm-hmm. I joined this church because my family, they were all AMEs, and there were 2 AME churches in Pueblo, Colorado. One was on the north side of town, and the other was on the south. Well, St. John was on the north side, and that's where my family went. Mm-hmm. And then something happened, and people got very upset with the minister, and things kind of broke down, and everybody who was at St. John decided that they would go to St. Paul on the south side. So there go I. And I didn't really want to do this, but I was pretty young, and I didn't have much to say about it. Anyway, I had never heard an organ before. And I had never heard, this was it wasn't a Hammond organ like what you hear. It was like a pipe organ, only it wasn't a pipe organ. Well, the first time I heard it, it just blew my mind. It just was I felt it was so beautiful. And I listened to these people, the congregation sing, and I'd never heard it like that before. A lot of those people were from the South, and I loved it so much, and I think that was my very first spiritual experience, because there was something that happened in that I decided that I had to be a part of this, and it was much, much, much bigger than I. Mm. And I couldn't explain it at all. I was only 9 years old. I didn't have words to articulate it, but it was very important. And the reason why I bring this up now is because this is a lot of what my music's about anyway. I mean, it's where it comes from. I want to share that experience with as many people as I can.
That's absolutely beautiful, because I think that there's so many people who can make that connection between music and spirituality, and music is a way of calling them into some very sacred and special places. I want to thank you again for just allowing us to be here in your home in Oakland, California, and to have this conversation with you. My first introduction to your music was when you performed at the Sister Comrade event several years ago, and you were playing your arrangement of We Shall Overcome, and Melanie DeMore was singing it, and I thought there was nothing more sublime than that piece. And as a matter of fact, it's on YouTube, and so I've shared it on my Facebook page, and sublime is the word that someone used. So it's really wonderful to just talk to you about those spaces in your interior life that make it possible for music to be that for you and for others. Tell us how you started out in music.
Well, I wasn't quite 4 years old, and my mother was, she'd play the piano for the choir, and sometimes they'd have choir rehearsal at our house. And so I would listen to them, and I would, really like the music, especially when they'd sing a nice spiritual or gospel that was, animated, rhythmic, and that was my introduction to live music, really. I didn't hear jazz on the radio or anything like that. The first music I ever heard was church music, really. And my mother really wanted me to learn how to play the piano. She had always wanted to play, and she had taught herself to play. And so I don't think it occurred to her, or maybe it did occur to her, but she decided that I would have my first lesson when here I was 3 years and 9 months old. And I remember that first lesson. And I remember being prepared for this lesson because my mother kept talking about it. She said, when you go there, I want you to behave yourself and you listen to the teacher. You do what she says do. So here finally the day arrives. And we go to the lady's house, and I was so small, of course, they had to pile up books and things so that my feet would be firmly planted somewhere. I wouldn't just be swinging my feet. And the lesson consisted only of her explaining to me what the keyboard was, and she ran her hands over all the white keys, and then she said, "These are the white keys." And then she ran her hands over the black keys and said, "These are the black keys." And I thought, oh, okay. And then she says, "You may be excused." And I said, "Is that all?" That was all for that day. And then, the rest is kind of history. I took to music very, very quickly. And very quickly, I decided that I did not want to take piano lessons anymore. I did not like playing the music that I was given to learn. And in fact, I wasn't learning it all that well. I mean, my mother was playing the music for me, and I was learning it by ear. And the teacher didn't realize that at first. And then they realized, okay, she's not reading the music. So you stop playing the music for her. And at that time, it was like, you must not play by ear. You must be a literate musician. You must learn to read. And there were all these stories about people who played by ear but didn't know how to read. And none of it made a whole lot of sense to me. It's kind of over my head. Why wouldn't you want to play by ear? Your ears, it seemed, would be very important. But at that time, they thought that this was a bad thing. And so I wasn't interested. I don't want to take lessons anymore. And there was a fight between my mother and I for years about piano lessons. And I didn't decide that I wanted to play again for quite a long time. I continued to play, and I continued actually to improve, to grow. And I finally did learn to read. But I think by the time I was 8 years old, we had this little choir, and it was the kids, of the church, and we had these little white robes and these little large red ribbons, and I was the pianist, and we were doing some songs at rehearsal, and I thought the hymns, I just thought they were kind of dorky. That wasn't a word then, but as they were written. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that I wasn't supposed to play by ear, so I would try to sneak in something extra every now and then when I thought my mother wasn't paying attention, because she was part of she was one of the chaperones, so to speak, leaders. And I think at that point they gave up. They decided to just leave it alone, that in fact that this was a blessing and not a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. A little later, I really got interested in playing again, and I'd learn all the hit parade songs. And music was still not the number one thing in my life, at least at the time. I didn't think of myself as growing up to become a musician, but I just played, When I decided that I wanted music to be a part of my life, to be my life, it was much later.
So you decided to leave Colorado and then go to Howard University?
I didn't go right to Howard University out of high school. I went to junior college in Pueblo, mm-hmm. Colorado. At that time, it was Pueblo Junior College. I graduated with an AA degree, and then I went to Adams State Teachers College, which was in Alamosa, Colorado. And I majored in music, but I was still... What I wanted to do was, I think I wanted to be a composer, but it was a long time before I just finally put a name to it. That excited me. And when I heard great music, I would think, I want to do that. So in school for a while, I just kind of took the courses that I was supposed to take, and I dropped out, and I actually got married. I dropped out, and then I'd gone back to Adams State. And while I was on my second round there, I got married, and still had not much direction in my life. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was going through a lot of stuff. I was a little troubled about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't interested in a lot of the things that the kids at my age were interested in. I just felt kind of like out of place. So anyway, I get married and moved to Washington, D.C. And that is how I came to go to Howard University. Ah. The man I married was in the service. He had been stationed at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs. And he used to come to Pueblo on the weekends. And so anyway, I ended up marrying him, and we had a daughter between us. And but of course I didn't stay married. During that time that we were together, I knew that I wanted to have a career in music. And I was, how would I make a living? Nobody ever, and no one would ever say that you could make a living as a musician. They said, how are you going to make a living? Well, you can teach, you can teach. I wasn't real interested in that either, but I was sort of willing to consider teaching, but I knew I wanted to be involved in the creative part of it. And my husband thought that was kind of silly, and he thought he at one point said he felt sorry for me. I didn't let any of that stuff stop me, though. Once I made up my mind, I didn't care what anybody said. I knew that it was in me. I knew I had it in me. I knew there were things I needed to learn, the nuts and bolts, but I knew that it was in me.
At the time, did you also understand or have any sense of the fact that you were attracted to women?
Yes, I did. When I was at Adams State Teachers College, I would get a crush on somebody. I had a crush on someone. It was not that intense, But, I had a crush on her. And I thought that I should be having a crush on a guy, not this girl. I don't know that I didn't think about what to do about it, or I don't know. I just knew that from time to time I get crushes on somebody. And one year, the year that I was out of school, a young lady was living in Pueblo from Denver who I became very fascinated with. And I just really felt like, gosh, I want to know her. I want to know this person. And I realized that I had another one of these damn crushes. And what am I going to do about that? And there wasn't really anything I could do about it. I decided that, well, I didn't decide exactly to embrace it, but it was there, and I didn't understand it. And all I knew about it was that it was forbidden and it was thought to be the worst thing you could possibly be. Mm-hmm. And it was like God does not approve. So I guess I was busy trying to make a success of being a heterosexual, and I had never had any experience with women at all. I just had crushes on them. And my husband and I separated. I knew that I didn't want to be married anyway. I didn't want to admit to myself that I didn't want to be. I didn't want to admit it at all, but that was the truth. I did not really want to be married. And we separated, and I was playing for a big Baptist church in D.C., and they had a good choir and a lot of good singers in that choir. There were a couple of divas in the soprano section. And of course, like I said, I always liked playing in church. And so I loved this job. And one of the sopranos seemed to take a liking toward me. And I had not a clue because I wasn't attracted to her at all, Mm-hmm. And so I didn't get it. And we used to go have coffee after church sometimes. Go have lunch or something. And so finally, after I separated, this woman did introduce herself to me. Mm-hmm. And, she told me what the deal was. And it kind of freaked me out. But on the other hand, it was like I was really curious. At the same time, I was also freaked. I was pretty... I just didn't know what to do with it. So we never really had much of a relationship at all, mm-hmm. Because I was scared. And she got tired of me being crazy, being so scared. And I could, looking back, I can see why she got, she just did not want to deal anymore. Mm-hmm. But it was through that relationship that I admitted to myself mm-hmm. that I really preferred relationships with women. And I never felt like I hated men. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really afraid of them. I just didn't want them as my closest. I didn't want intimacy with them.
It's interesting because you talk about, your experience of growing up in the church and having this real connection with music and introducing you to this very abiding spiritual place. And then knowing that you had this attraction for women, was that a conflict for you being in those spiritual places and being a spiritual person?
Yes, it was a conflict. I didn't yet understand my connection with God. I thought there was something wrong with me. And this deep feeling I had was something that to keep a lid on, because I sensed that God was a part of all of us, that God was all there is, really. And I would sometimes say to myself, well, I'm a child of the universe. As people say, I'm a child of God. Well, I'm a child of the universe, and I would feel very expanded. Mm-hmm. And it was a feeling of love and, just big love, God love. It was a feeling of joy, peace. But people did not talk about spirituality. They talked about religion and doctrine. So I didn't understand any of that. Some people would tell you that's the devil, Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought maybe it was, even though it was hard for me to accept, of course. Mm-hmm. But I knew that there was something there, and I kept it to myself. And I kept a lid on it. I didn't want anybody to know. So when this was going on in Washington, D.C., I sought to escape a lot of it by, drinking too much. And, I just couldn't deal. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had no one to talk to. Mm. The people that I would talk to was this person that had introduced me the whole idea, and they all thought I was crazy. So, they didn't have patience with me because they had accepted where they were, and I was still trying to intellectualize it or to figure it out, and I figured it had to be wrong, and so why is it wrong? Instead of, this is who I am,
right,
and this is who we are. I couldn't do it at that time.
That seems like a lot, finding your sense of space in the world, being a single mother, having a love for music and wanting to expand that. How did you begin to create a life and from out of all of that come into this space where you begin to deal with music at a much higher professional level?
Well, I had to go through a lot. I had to, I won't say waste a lot of time. I went through what I went through, trying to find myself, trying to understand. And I was alone a lot. I spent a lot of time alone. I was a loner. And I didn't let people get too close to me. I was afraid that, I was afraid. And I also used to have fears about if I were to get too well known, that some of my acquaintances, some of my gay friends or acquaintances would out me. And that used to worry me. Mm-hmm. So, until I left D.C. and went back home, I worked at music. I was working with a theater company, a little theater company. And I was just kind of going through life a day at a time, I guess, hiding. What I did most was hide. Mm. Even though I'm sure that some people could figure it out, I would not, I was hiding. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I came out to California, really. I had, when I was in Denver, I heard a record by Meg Christian. It was called I Know You Know, and that was the name of the album, I Know You Know. And then there was another singer, Chris Williamson, who had come out with The Changer and The Changed. Well, I didn't know anything about these people, but I had my eye on the women's movement. Mm-hmm. I had been watching that, and I had read Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. I would read anything I could find because there was a real connection for me between sexism and my being gay, which I connected. You know, I was very angry about what we call sexism. I didn't know what to call it then, but I didn't like it. And when I was in Denver, this woman, a white woman, sat me down and played one of these albums for me, Meg Christian. And I thought, my God, I can't believe that this is happening. And you know, at the same time, I read about these concerts how people woke up, and you know, I was flabbergasted. And a few months after that, I think I found my way out to California, and wasn't looking for them, but I went to Los Angeles, and what I was looking for, I wanted to find out where there were women's consciousness raising groups, because I did go to a couple of those when I was in D.C. It led me to a place that there didn't seem to be a centralized place where I could really find women who were feminists. This is what I wanted to know. Mm-hmm. Women who were politically, you know, astute, who you know, could make the connections and stuff.
Right.
And I went to this place called the Women's Center, I think is what it was, and found a place through them called the Saloon. And this is this little place in Hollywood where the women met. Mm-hmm. And that's how this whole thing, what I'm doing right now, got started. It was, I started playing with women who were part of the movement, women-loving women, women-identified women, who sang, and I could play, so I, you know, play with them, and I started meeting people. And I got a phone call from Olivia Records, and they were looking for somebody to play piano on Teresa Trull's album. And so I went to have this audition, and it was with Linda Tillery and Teresa Trull, and I got the job. Mm-hmm. And that's where my professional life became, you know, that's really was the start there. Mm. I had been playing professionally with jazz groups and with guys, men, you know, in Washington, D.C. I've been doing all of that for a while. But here now, all of a sudden, it's all women. I needed to be myself. I needed to be who I was. And I it was the perfect thing for me. I had been pretending for a long time.
Well, it's so interesting how music was a gift to you as a child, and then it became that vehicle for opening you up to who you truly were as a woman. Music is powerful in that way, the ways it can speak to us. Tell us a little bit about your desire and you've spoken a little bit about your desire for composing, but what that path was like, because you've done a number of things. And I remember you being in Atlanta a few years ago when there was an opportunity for us to hear excerpts from your opera on the life of Fannie Lou Hamer. And this year you're doing an opera about the life of Emmett Till, and I know you've also done one to Claire Barton. So you've had this, and those are just a few things that you've done in terms of the operas. But tell us how you emerged into this space as a composer.
Well, I always, I'd improvise when I was supposed to be practicing, and I was trying to improve on Chopin, and not really, but I would take off. I would come to a passage that I really like, say in a Beethoven sonata, and I think, wonder what would have happened if he'd have done this, and then I was off to the races. So there was always that thing of my wanting to go further and to explore. And I noticed that, of course, this is what I preferred to do in the practice rooms when I was at Howard. I didn't really want to practice piano. I wanted to create things, experiment. So it was something that I always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just there.
It certainly is unique, though, in terms of thinking about when we think about Black women composers who have made a professional life of it. There are not many that are on the top of the tip of our tongues. And I would imagine, certainly growing up in the time in which you did and really making ways into the world of composing and arranging, there may have been some struggles for you as a woman and certainly as a Black woman.
This might sound naive, but I was just thinking not too long ago that I have been really blessed, and I have been. I decided this is what I want to do against all odds, and I would get these opportunities, and I came along at the right time. I was not really young when I started this. I was older, and I had an opportunity to mature some, and it was not usual that you would meet Black women composers, but it was not unheard of. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't care whether there'd never been one or not. I mean, that's how much I believed that this is what I was supposed to do, and that this is what I am going to do. And things would open up for me, and I would get opportunities. And I think, the first time I wrote for orchestra, I don't know that I guess I was ready to do it, but I certainly wasn't on top of it the way I didn't know as much about it as I do today. Mm-hmm. People gave me opportunities, and and it was through the women's movement that this all happened. I don't think that it would have happened had I just been out there in the world trying to deal with, white men. Although it was white men, it gave me the first opportunity to ever have something played by orchestra, and it was not for a performance. It was just a read-through so that I could hear what I had written, and that just was so wonderful for me. It only said to me, I can do it. I can do it better. Mm-hmm. I'll do it better next time. I always said that there's going to be a next time, and I'm going to do it better. And that's the way. That's how I approached this. Then I got these gigs, doing films. I didn't use orchestra. I often did them on samplers and electronically. But what I'm interested in now and what I love the most is I really love doing opera. It's just music, music, music. And it's a story. Mm-hmm. And there's ups and downs. And, I love it,
How did you make that transition into opera?
I went to a workshop. Some guy called me up. A guy named Clark Sopranowitz called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in attending a workshop for composers, lyricists, playwrights. There was an opera a workshop over in San Francisco. Mm. And funny thing is, Clark is not somebody who's a pal. I mean, he's not somebody that I've hung around with. I just sort of know him. We know each other. I think I've done one gig with him, maybe two. He's a bass player. but he's also interested in composition. And so he calls me. And I'm sure that, they said, we need to have some black people. That's another thing that helped me, is there came a time when it was important that black people be recognized and that they exist and they do things. So he calls me and asks me about this workshop. And yes, I went and I met a playwright there from Minneapolis. And he and I decided we wanted to do an opera. We had to create a little thing for the workshop together, and we found that we were able to work together very well. So he had written a play about Clara Barton, and he said he thought it would make a great opera. And that's how I got interested in opera. And I think actually before that I'd had a few instances where with Lorraine Hansberry Theater, I had taken some words and set music to it. And so I thought I kind of had a knack for that. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for an opportunity, and somewhere in my mind, to do something like that. And so that's how I got started. And then Dark River is something that was my idea.
Mm-hmm. The opera on Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to do an opera about the civil rights movement. I had to decide where to focus because it's pretty huge. And so I focused on Fannie Lou Hamer. And I wrote the libretto and the music. And I can't believe I did that, but I did. And I loved it. It was, that in itself was a spiritual experience. And I went through anger, sadness, joy, ecstasy working on that. And the reason it got performed was because I happened to run into the director of Opera Lyric Theater. And I told him that I was working on an opera. And I didn't, he didn't know that nobody had. I wasn't even really working on it yet. Mm-hmm. It was an idea. I said, I'm working on an opera. And he said, well, we could write a grant for that. And I said, oh, well, great, because, I've gotten several grants and I always come through. I follow through on them, and, which is true. I did. Sure enough, they decided to produce it. And they wrote grants and got some grants. That's how it came about. And it's because in my mind and in my heart is this thing that must reach people. Music is to open you up, is to open your heart to yourself and to others, but to yourself. If you can love yourself, you can accept yourself, warts and all, everything. But it's not a selfish kind of thing. It's just loving yourself as God's creation. That's what drives me.
Mm-hmm. Tell me how the concept for the Emmett Till opera came about.
Well, that was written by Clara Koss. Mm-hmm. And it was a play as well. And it got several awards. And she decided that she would like for it to be an opera. And she had heard some music of mine and decided to ask me about doing it. And so that's how I came to do it.
And that's going to be finished this year.
Yeah, it's finished. I'm doing a little orchestration, some reorchestrating a few things on it, but it's supposed to be performed in October of this year. We're trying to raise money. We're still trying to raise money. It's a bad year because it's an election year. But somehow or another, we have to do it.
Mm-hmm. You've had a number of decades on this planet listening to music, composing, arranging music. I'm curious to know what you think about the music you hear today.
Well, I listen to music sometimes in the car. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I listen to it on YouTube. I like some of the classical music. Some of the orchestration is fantastic. I don't get the lift from it that I get from some of the older stuff. Like, to me, the Baroque period is the greatest. I mean, I don't get that. But I get other things, and it's good. The pop music, I don't really understand that too well.
I had to ask that because someone asked Jesse Norman a similar question about music today. And a lot of people who are in the music business today and who've been in it for a very long time have some very solid opinions about musicality and where we are today. And I'm wondering if a part of that is because of where we are today is because of how we have not really given our children the benefit of music education that so many of us had. I played the piano as a kid. You talked about playing when you were 3 years and 9 months old. And that really seems to be a luxury now when so many kids don't even have music in the classrooms. What's the value of teaching our kids music? And how do you think we can address this lack of kids not only playing music and learning music, but hearing good music?
First of all, we do need to expose them to good music, and we need to put it back in the schools. I don't know exactly how it should be done, but I think that the state of a lot of what we hear today is a reflection of the state of the world, which is there's a darkness in some of the music I hear. It's there's a futility. Oh, that's just my opinion, but it's almost as though people are afraid to feel hope or to feel real joy. That I know every generation has their own expression, I guess. But a lot of what I hear today it leaves me a little frustrated. I hear songs that the melodic range of the song is so narrow that, there's no highs, no lows. It's, I don't know.
We've talked about where you've been as a composer and arranger. What's next? What do you want to do in the future?
More of the same. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't know if I'll do another opera. I don't know. I hope I do some more music for orchestra, symphonic stuff. I just did a piece for cello and piano that was performed in October, and it was successful, and I enjoyed doing that a lot. I'll probably always write. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm not writing, I improvise all the time. I wish I had written down music that I just sit down and play.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything we've left out? Any point of information that you would like to share with our listeners, or anything you think would be valuable as we bring to a close this incredible conversation about music and life, composing?
I would just say, it's all about your belief system. I think, life's not easy. It's hard. And some people don't have an opportunity to even know sometimes what their gift is, and let alone express it. But the only way I know is the way I did, and that is I just believed. I believed in myself. And that's saying I was always very shy, and believe it or not, I don't really talk very much. I don't, I don't, and I'm pretty quiet. But I kept the belief I had in my heart and in my mind, and it didn't really matter what anybody said. I protected myself. I knew I had to, because there's a lot of negativity out here. And when the time came, the time was right for me, I think about this a lot, and I think about, how in the world I wound up doing this. But I always said that I would. But it's like, oh, you're just dreaming. Yeah, I was.
Well, that's so amazing, because on my way over here, the Lyft driver told me, she said, I'm just trying to keep dreaming. I'm just trying to keep dreaming. And when I got off the car, I told her, keep dreaming. And in a sense, I suppose that's all we have, is to dream and make those dreams come true. And I'm so glad that you have believed so much in yourself to make those dreams come true, because you have provided some incredible music, sublime moments for those of us who love your work and who are so excited about all that you bring to the world of music. Mary Watkins, thank you for being part of our Black lesbian herstory.
Thank you for asking me.
I told you would enjoy that episode with Mary Watkins. Wasn't she phenomenal? 8 decades of creativity. Wow. I hope it inspires you to move in your creative energy, whatever that may be, if it's music or gardening or writing or whatever it is. Make the assumption that you can do what you're meant to do and go for it. What an inspiring story. Thank you, Miss Watkins, for an incredible, candid, gracious interview. Thanks for taking a chance on letting us capture some of those memories and preserve them in the pod sphere. If you want to hear more about Mary Watkins and her music, visit her website. A link to that will be in the show notes, where you can hear examples of her work. As always, I so appreciate you listening to the podcast. Wherever you listen to the podcast, leave a comment, some feedback about how you enjoy what we're doing. It would mean the world to me. And as always, be safe and have a sweet one.
Hey.